Actually, one way to interpret the resurrection story is through the experience of forgiveness. You can believe it literally if you like, if it helps you to think that Jesus walked out of the tomb. I can't myself put much meaning on that, where the body went. I wouldn't want to try and disabuse someone who actually thought that had happened. I would want to dig deeper into the meaning of the resurrection, and for me it's encapsulated in the experience of St. Peter, and because that's a resurrection I've known. Peter's story is an absolutely characteristic human story. Peter was a boastful disciple of Jesus. He was the loudest mouthed. He was the one that always swore never to desert. I'll die with you. The others can run away and forsake you. I never will. And Peter meant that, because he was a good man, but he didn't know who he was. He didn't know until that moment in the courtyard. Jesus has been arrested, and Peter follows him afar off, a longing to love him and to be faithful to him. And it's only when he's challenged, "You're one of this man's disciples," and Peter denies that, he discovers who he is. He discovers he's a coward. He's not able to follow him to death. And one of the really most tragic experiences in human life is to be in a set of circumstances that show you who you are and you don't like it. And Peter discovered he was a betrayer, he was a coward, he denied him 3 times. And the most moving little text in the Gospels for me is in Luke, when it says that after his 3rd denial, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered what he'd said, and he burst out crying. The Gospel says, and he wept, but he remembered how Jesus had said, "Dear old Peter, before the cock crows, you'll have denied me 3 times. And he goes out and weeps bitterly. And what then happens in the New Testament is, to me, deeply moving. There's a story at the end of John's Gospel, and Peter experiences Jesus on the beach of the Sea of Galilee. And Jesus takes him for a wee walk. And he doesn't say, "You denied me, Peter, didn't you? I told you you were going to do it." He doesn't say that. He asks him 3 times if he loves him. He reinstates Peter. He acknowledges that Peter did love him. Peter genuinely loved him, but he was too weak to go to death with him. And that's the human experience. We do pose these ideals for ourselves. We want to be faithful. We want to be brave. We want to be hardworking. We want to be true. We want to be this. We want to be that, because we admire these qualities. And then circumstances put us in a situation where we discover that's not who we are. And it's unbearable. And here is Jesus saying to Peter, in spite of who you are, this coward, this denier, I love you. And I know you love me in your weakness. And that kind of strengthened Peter, that forgave Peter, enabled Peter to go on. Can you imagine the despair of denouncing and denying the person you love? And people commit suicide over things like that. Why did Peter not commit suicide? Because he knew that he was loved and forgiven through it. And Peter went on being a denier, a bit of a coward. One of the stories that moves me to tears is a complete legend. It's not in the Bible, it's not a biblical myth, but someone actually wrote a wonderful novel about it. And it's about Peter and an old man. He's still been the same old man, blustery and loud, and yet cowardly and an escapee from hardship and tough times. And the legend says that when Nero started persecuting Christians in Rome, he set Rome on fire and he blamed the Christians. And the legend says Peter was in Rome and he runs away. He runs away yet again. And he's trudging up the Via Appia, the Appian Way, out of Rome, and he meets Jesus going back towards Rome. And he says to Jesus, Quo vadis, Domine? whither goest thou, Lord? And Jesus says, I'm going back into Rome to die for you again. And this time, Peter turns round and goes back. And the legend is that he died. He was crucified upside down because he couldn't bear to be crucified the way Jesus had. So what it's teaching us is there's always just a chance of going on, even in the most outrageous failure, when you've lost all your ideals and betrayed yourself and the people you love. Never despair. There is always the possibility of starting over if you're forgiven. That's, to me, what the resurrection is about. And I've seen it. I've seen it in the lives of people who've been forgiven much, who've even learned to forgive themselves, which is much more difficult. And religion carries this good stuff. And it's not afraid of the emotion of it, which is why I'll be at church on Easter Day, because that story continues to be important to humanity. We need to learn to go on even though we've failed. And we need to learn to accept forgiveness even though we don't think we deserve it. And that gives us back the future. The way dear old Peter the Apostle, right up to the very end, was running away.